Alright, hello everyone, welcome back. I hope everyone's week has been going well, and that everyone has managed to find books this week that have interested and thrilled them. Today I am going to be talking to you guys about the third book in the Path of Ascension series. And so let's get started. So the third book is going to picks up right where we left Matt and Liz before, with them deciding, being forced into the vassal war that was starting. And so they get some time to do a couple last-minute tests on their riffs before they have to tear up. In which time they managed to get a couple of really neat items and a growth item for Liz. And then they tear up to 6 for the start of the war. Now, this book, if you are uninterested in detailed explanations of how a nation would go about a war, then this book is not for you. Because that is what this book is. We follow Matt and Liz as they fight through the vassal war. It is the entirety of this book. And I find it really interesting to see how the Empire would handle a war. Not everyone is going to. And there are routine breakdowns of how their points, which are used to buy things out of a shop, are used. It is very gamified, you know. The book series, if you've gotten this far in and haven't noticed already, is a hybrid of the Shang-Chi cultivation style novel and a game light novel, so it is to be expected, but it is there, and it is pretty prevalent all throughout. But Matt and Liz do end up joining the Kingdom of Seven Sons on their side, and they end up being team leaders for a team that is of people on the path to be put together and to be sent out on missions. Not a lot of the missions are all that important. It is noted by Matt that the kingdom has put Pathers together in a team, and then their Empire troops together in teams, but there are no teams with both Pathers and Empire troops, which makes sense to me because of the rules of the Path, but it was noted. And so they go through the war. A couple of their early missions are just them going out to take a fort or something. That the Empire Army, which has shown up to a battalion of which has shown up to watch over the war and to make sure there are no actual people dying in this war. Which is one of the big rules for this war, and why a lot of people call the Pather Wars as they're just games, because there are usually a bunch of high-tier people waiting around for when you would the war AI, which they call it, has flagged you as dead, and then they'll pull you out, and then you'll have to be on. You'll get whatever wounds you have healed, and then you're on a 2-week cooldown, where you can't do anything, and you just kind of have to cool your heals for a bit. And then you have to buy your way back into the war by spending all of your points. So, which we find out later is not quite accurate. You spend half your points to buy back into the war, and then half your points go into a bank account, basically, for you to use when you do finally drop out of the war. So, the first little bit of the war is not too exciting. There isn't a lot going on until they get to the first auction, where we find out a bit more about one of the people who are joining Matt and Liz, and Aster on this in this war, is a girl by the name of Emily. Yeah, Emily. Sorry, it's been a couple of days since I finished this book. I believe her name was Emily. And she has a unique talent that seems to double spells she casts, as long as the chain of spells she casts are all of different elements. And a cracked mana bolt comes up that can produce a random element. It's literally perfect for her. So the team manages to pool their points and get that for her. Speaking of their other teammates, so that's Emily, who is a mage. Then there is, oh god, what's her name? I really should have done this video sooner. It's been a couple of days since I finished it. Oh, sorry. I just woke up, actually. Yeah, I can't remember the other two's names right now. If I remember them, I might edit the video, but so they have two other team members whose names, like I said, I can't remember. One is a rogue. The other is a solo delver. So this is a new experience for him. And he is a solo delver because he has a unique talent that lets him use a skill called Demon Zone, which basically puts a field around you that reflects damage and to anyone in the field. His talent lets him stand in it and not be affected by it. But he can partner up with Matt on a front line because Matt's cracked phantom armor can ignore the damage from Demon Zone. But that is the biggest thing that happens in this auction. The only other thing of note is that this is when we find out the prizes for the two rulers, who are the two different vassal rulers, if their side wins the war. Alright, sorry about that. Oh yes, the prizes for the two rulers. So they each get a unique item that's been made for them that they'll get if they win. In addition, they get an unnamed and unshown item because said item has not been made yet. And it is an item crafted by the kingdom's best crafter. And so, but that is where we leave the auction. Going back into the war, we have the two different royals. Sorry. We have the two different royals send out their teams. Specifically, where the Pather teams get sent out with instructions to sack and then capture, if able, as many their assigned forts. And in a moment of profound stupidity, as far as I am concerned, the prince, who is the royal in charge, or is the general for the army. He is not the royal in charge, his dad is, but he is the general for the army. Does not expect his Pathers to do super well on getting and capturing these. Okay, sorry again, you guys. I don't know what's going on. But as I said, in a moment of profound stupidity, he does not expect his Pathers to manage to capture all of the forts, which is, as I said, just immensely idiotic, given what the Path of Ascension is supposed to be for. But lo and behold, they get swamped in requests for reinforcement from the Pathers and end up needing to send in their words, less than ideal people out to reinforce them. Matt and Liz's team are one of those teams that got sent out, and they captured their fort, and they end up requesting reinforcements. They get told their reinforcements are on the way, and then they end up getting attacked. And they end up dying in the fort. And we see that moments after Matt died, and Matt died last, that their reinforcements show up. Very obviously delaying, and as we find out, delaying because you get more points from the system, from the way the game is set up, for capturing a fort than holding a fort. So, it is a purely selfish act. So this is Matt and Liz's first and only death during the war. And so they died. They get pulled out by the army, and they get healed up, and Liz begins, after they discuss what happened and talk to Junie, who we see Junie and the prince having a absolute fit over this, knowing that it is going to cause tons of problems, and getting told that they will be compensated to a degree for what they lost. Liz decides that what is being done isn't enough and begins to form a Pather faction. She doesn't think it'll get strong enough to cause the Pathers to break away from the two kingdoms and start their own war, but there you have it. Mostly it is just to make sure that the Pathers, who the war is being fought for, aren't getting screwed. So, so that happens. Then after their cooldown, after their 2-week cooldown is over, they head out again, and this time they are running escort missions for the Empire. Specifically, the one they are on at this moment that we see is them going out in disguises to catch a bunch of people who have been raiding supply lines. They managed that without too much problem. They had to disguise themselves because they have basically been flagged at this point as, don't bother fighting this team, they'll kill you. Especially after they're showing at the large fort where they almost killed off, what was it? They almost beat fucking 200-man army, something like that, 300, 400. I don't remember. It was an incomprehensible number of people for them to have almost beaten. So, but after that, they basically get flagged by the queendom as, like, people you don't want to engage. So they have people running from them whenever they show up, which is why they're in disguises. They finish the job, not too difficult for them. But of note here, when they are on their way back to the neutral city that was set up, they see that one of their cities is about to go under siege, so they go over there to help out. And this is a really neat part of the book, because this is how we see how sieges would work in such a high-powered and highly magical system. And which is basically how normal sieges, in how normal medieval sieges would have worked, where they get surrounded and siege weapons are used, and siege towers and ladders and rope and, grappling hooks and all of that. Except for one other notable thing, and that is because you can teleport large numbers of troops in and out of a city, they have massive formations that are ruinously expensive, that they set up to lock down real space, as they call it, which basically just prevents teleporting. And this siege is grueling. It is brutal. Matt, who has revealed his concept to his team, and he shared that with them during the fort where they were, but basically backstabbed for no real reason. Is basically just flaunting his concept all throughout this fight. The siege lasts for a week, if I recall correctly. And we see, it's a pretty basic siege. Nothing too crazy really happens until the end of it. At one point, the mana barrier, which all of the cities have, is taken down, and there's a setup, brutal assaults on the city. At one point, the queendom manages to push the kingdom off the walls, and they are fighting in the streets when, all of a sudden the mana the barrier comes back up and traps a whole bunch of the queendom troops inside, and it is brutal fighting. This is about 4 days in, which is also when we find out that Matt has not been sleeping for 4 days and has just been using endurance to keep himself awake. And we find that out because he makes a really stupid decision at one point to charge into the middle of a bunch of Queendom elites, which are tier 7 people, but they have tier 8 armor. And he basically runs in alone, and Aster ends up needing to use her concept to basically flash freeze all of them, which basically exhausts her. So Matt gets chewed out for that by Liz, by Junie, who is the one overseeing the siege. And then the next morning, when he gets back up, because the mana barrier is coming down for real this time, he gets chewed out by Junie again, for being a fucking idiot, and he was. After that, the barrier comes down, and up until this point, the Queendom has been trying not to just level the city, which apparently that plan goes out the window at this point, and they just start trying to level the city to just get it taken. They begin fighting a losing battle for another couple days. And then I think it's day 6, I think it's 6, when they're fighting through the streets on a retreat, when the Queendom uses another neat trick, which is by launching the capsules, basically, over the walls that have people in them, to get people behind the kingdom lines. A really neat idea, but there you go. But they do end up losing the city, but as I mentioned before, Matt and Liz only die once during this war, and so they do end up getting out. And the way they get out is wonderful. They end up setting up a platform with Matt standing on the back with a mana cannon, which is just a cannon that you charge with mana and then it shoots the mana out. And they basically make a break for it with Matt just charging, shooting, charging, shooting, and charging and shooting this mana cannon over and over and over again. It is brutal. The sally to break through the Queendom lines and escape is long. It is a brutal fight. And at the end of it, just as they're getting away, they run into a void user, or what we first think is a void user, because he throws a ball of something at Matt, who Liz warns in time to have him get out of the way, and it destroys the mana cannon, and Matt ends up going toe-to-toe with the mage. And as he is charging into melee range with this mage, the mage throws another one of these balls at him, and Matt can't get out of the way, he's too close. So they clash, and this is the first time we really see the clashing of two concepts. And we get told that this other mage doesn't have a void power per se, but more like the inverse of what Matt's power is. He has a black hole to Matt's white hole. So there we get to see Matt push through someone else's concept, which is really cool. Matt ends up losing his arm again, but he does manage to break the other mage's concept and they get away. That is really the last major thing that happens during the war. Like, major significant thing. There's a couple other really neat things that come up and happen that might have implications later, but probably won't. The first of which is a bit later. We find out that Liz's partner in the Pather Union, which is what they're calling themselves, is a man named Talus, and he has been pestering Liz to go out with him for ages, and she's been turning him down over and over again, but he is not taking the hint. Just a right piece of work. And so they run into Talus's team at one point while they are out I think they were out doing smash and grabs because the neutral city was too dangerous for them to just hang out in, because there were so many assassins running around trying to take them out. And they were on their way back to the neutral city to just kind of turn in and be able to buy things, when they get a message to go help another team that has something that needs to get brought in, and that's where they run into Talus's team, and Matt and Talus fight, and Matt ends up beating Talus, not because he's a better swordsman than Talus. That is decidedly stated that he is not a better swordsman than Talus. Talus is just a better bladesman, but he ends up beating Talus with the growth ring he has by teleporting past Talus's guard and beating him that way, which royally pisses Talus off to the point of, as far as we are concerned at first, to just want to re-challenge Matt because he thinks Matt cheated. And so he starts pestering Matt, and this goes on for weeks and then months, basically, until it finally comes to a head during the third auction that is held during the war. After all of the events are done, Liz leaves and takes a drunk Alyssa, who is the woman that had originally betrayed them, which they have started to figure a little bit more out about, but she's not really all that important to the story, which is why I haven't mentioned her before now. Who kind of stumbled into their booth basically asking for a place where she could get away from the crowds, and so they just kind of let her stay. She ended up playing a pivotal role in helping the Pather Union form, so Alyssa says that Liz owes her a favor. So in the spirit of that, not intending to turn this into that favor, but in the spirit of recognizing that she does owe Alyssa for helping out then and since then, she says she'll take her back to her room. So Liz is out of the picture for this. And so Talus manages to chase Matt down, and finally, apparently he hasn't done this before, he's said a bunch of other awful nasty things to Matt, but he finally makes an offhand comment about Matt's parents, who, as I mentioned back in the first video, they died during the rift breaks on his planet, and this sets Matt off. So this gets Matt to finally fight Talus, and we see this fight from Talus's perspective. And we find out a little bit more about Talus here, as they are getting the fight started. For some reason, I don't know why, Mantis decided to try to humanize Talus when he does a bang-up job immediately after this of dehumanizing him again. But we find out that Talus has had a really rough childhood, basically. Had all of the expectations of his parents put on him because his brother had no martial ability, didn't want any martial ability, and they are a martial family. So, it sucks. Yeah, alright, fine. But, that doesn't, in my opinion, that doesn't really give you the right to be a royal asshole. But we find out that Talus has been so persistent about fighting Matt because apparently during their first fight, he came really close to forming his concept. So we see the fight from Talus's perspective as they start fighting, and Matt is just not in a good headspace, which is probably why we don't see things coming from Matt's perspective, because it really wouldn't be all that interesting, given that the impression we're given is that Matt just really wants to kill the man, and does a bang-up job of it, too. So, so they end up fighting there, and Matt literally breaks the man. He ends up completely pulverizing his chest. Like, his ribs are gone, his heart is gone. We find out that Matt instinctively almost used his concept to lock real space down around him, making it so that the normal judge couldn't pull him out without potentially seriously injuring Matt as well. But as it's about to be to the point where the judge has to do this, one of the army watchers yanks Talus out and gets him off to a healer. And then we briefly see things from Talus's brother's perspective, and we leave them basically wondering what happened and wondering who had interfered in the fight to, seriously injure their brother, and they leave with the intent of finding out. But that's where we leave that, and that hasn't come back up yet. It might, but we'll see. But of note, that is basically it. The rest of the war goes by without too much more major going on. Back at the beginning of the book, we found out that Melinda's team was also coming to the war, but they're fighting on the Queendom side. So we do get a couple of interesting things from them. Most notably that Melinda has been trying to find a way to help ease old age for mortals, and one of the things she wants to do with that is to take the changes that happened in Matt after he ate the root of the Tree of Perfection to get a near perfect body, to basically help transfer those changes onto others. And we see that she can do that as she does it to herself, but it takes an exorbitant amount of mana to do. So, after that, the rest of the war really passes without too much major going on. Nothing major really happens, at least on the overarching plot of the rest of the books, as far as things that may come up later. But that is basically it. The war ends with the king in charge of the Kingdom of Seven Sons revealing that his plan was, if he was going to lose the war, which he does, to basically nuke it and taint the entire planet, which is also what happens. We briefly get a view of something of what is going on the nearby Tier 20 planet, which is what the actual war is being fought over, and that one of the king's children, his eldest, his firstborn, his daughter, ends up betraying him, and her and a bunch of his nobles end up defecting to the queendom, which royally pisses him off. So he ends up technically winning the vassal war, but losing the war for the Tier 20 planet, and losing a lot of other ground too. So, winning the vassal war, he doesn't even get to keep the planet, so it's not a lot there. But that is basically the end of the book. We see the two kind of end credit scenes, because that's really what they are we follow the Emperor as he goes to get a bunch of skills for the Tier 10 tournament for Melinda and a bunch of other Pathers who we haven't met. And then we see Mara and Leon bringing a tier 7 planet over to basically take the tier 6 planet that the Vassal War was being fought on, because they want to add it to their or Mara wants to add it to her collection. We do see her basically, they do run into the king, and she ends up delaying all of the rewards he's supposed to get until he serves some time on a cleanup detail as recompense for, frankly speaking, for contaminating the world that Mara wanted. So, but that is the end of the third book. Sorry it was kind of more rambly and vague. Like I said, there's a lot of nitty-gritty details about the war and how wars are fought, but I didn't really want to go into that in this video. Looking at my timer, regardless, this video looks like it's going to be longer than the other two, so but that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, as I mentioned in the comments of as I mentioned in the description of the other video, I apologize for any video qualities with that one. I just wanted to test out the front-facing camera on my phone, and as you can probably tell, decided I didn't like the quality of that. So, but I hope you guys enjoy I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I hope you guys find a book that you guys can really dive into and enjoy. I will talk to you guys later. Bye now.